Grandfather, it's me, Apela Colorado, and I call to you again to ask you, please hear what's in our hearts at this gathering. There are people here from all over the world, Creator, each with a different way of knowing and being and talking to you, all of them beautiful.
My name is Heather Annette Seeley. I am of Anglo-Saxon, tribal, Dutch, Italian, Scottish, French, and German ancestry.
My name is Audri Scott Williams. I am of Cherokee, Seminole, African, and Irish descent.
My name is Heidi Guttmann, and I am of Chinese and European descent.
My name is Atava Garcia Swiecicki. My ancestors are the Western Slavic people from Poland, the Magyar people from Hungary, the Tomatic people from Mexico, and the Dene or Navajo people from the American Southwest, otherwise known as Turtle Island.
My life's work is to call together the four directions here in North America, white, red, black, and yellow, to remember us, to bring us back together by remembering who we are in the context of this native, natural Mother Earth.
It is the call of our ancestors that's bringing us into that program, because here is a nurturing environment that allows us to remember, not only in our head, but in our heart.
Elders used to say that when we do that, when the white man in particular remembers who he is, remembers his medicine circle and his powers, then we can sit together as equals and we will see a healing on this earth.
No matter who you are, you have an earth-based spirituality to return to. So even if I'm Polish, even if, I'm Hungarian or English or Irish or African or Mexican, we all have a root, and we go back through our blood DNA ancestors. And that for me is one of the distinguishing factors that's very important. It was very clear that I was Polish. I got teased a lot for my last name, and I got Polish jokes tossed my way. And my mother, her being Mexican and Native American, she's brown skin and is obviously, not white. So even though I'm very white skinned, I was always clear that there was other things in the mix. And I was aware that I was Mexican and Native American, but not very much culturally.
I was adopted by my grandmother and her second husband, who was a German Jewish refugee. So I always would say I was Chinese and German. I thought maybe I was Irish, so sometimes I would say I'm Chinese and Irish, or sometimes I would still say I was Chinese and German because I have a German name, and I didn't want to have to explain the whole story because it's kind of complicated. So being adopted it always felt like I was lying about who I was.
My grandfather was born in Mexico. My grandmother, my father's mother, spoke fluent Polish, was very much in earlier days involved in that community, but I didn't grow up around either of them.
Being raised in America, I didn't know much about Chinese culture. I didn't know who my birth father was.
And I left Catholicism, which was really liberating, and then I didn't really know what else was out there.
I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian religion, so there's very little ritual at all. Most ritual was considered bad.
But throughout history, Creator, we find ourselves many times in that dark place where there are losses, dreadful losses.
It first came to me understanding what had happened to my indigenous Native American ancestors and my indigenous Mexican ancestors who clearly 500 years ago were living their lives freely in this country, and then people came from Europe and enforced a whole set of beliefs upon these people, enslaved them, enslaved their consciousness, killed them, made them convert to Christianity. I mean, you know, acts of violence, physical, mental, emotional, until like the people themselves forget who they are.
On the one level, we can look at history and we can see how colonization affected a displacement of our sort of birthright of our ancient wisdom, and how that ancient wisdom was so much a part of our day-to-day life. In the ancient ways, or our tribal ways, you could not talk about spirit. There was often very little reference for spirit outside of any experience, because spirit was the experience. And so as colonization came about, many of the old traditions and rituals that were a part of our strengthening, nurturing, community building, all of that was dissipated, and new systems and new ways were brought in, and those new systems and new ways spoke to separation.
Finding out that my female ancestors had bound feet, which I'd never considered before, but it's been a process of sort of acknowledging that that lives in me now still.
You also always have to talk about, how have I been the colonizer? Because I don't think there's many people on the planet who are just victims or just oppressors. Like, a lot of us have in our lifetimes or in our ancestors' lifetimes played both roles. And that's something that I really like about this program, is that, especially for the European American people who are in this program, they're, you know, in a supportive, loving environment, are encouraged to look at maybe what their ancestors have perpetuated against other people.
Over here, the missionaries came because there was a lesson to be learned. But when they came, the missionaries had given up what they came, the cloth, they gave that up and decided to become business people instead. So they ended up being the business people here. Mm-hmm. They gave up their word, their vow. But you see, prior to their coming, 40 years prior to their coming, the elders already knew that they were coming. Therefore, they took everything and they hid. But then, where did they hide it? And what the ancestors said, they hid it here, because nobody looks here. They're always looking out there.
Grandfather, as we face ourselves and look into the darkness, oftentimes what we see looking back is our vision of our own unworthiness, of our own inner turmoil, of our own sense of failure. So many of these views, Grandfather, are based on mistaken notions. And for this Creator, I give you thanks.
And I mean, and I've been in that practice of, you know, forgiving my ancestors, forgiving my parents, forgiving myself. Because it's this program isn't about, you know, finding things we've done wrong and then, you know, beating ourselves up about it.
It's painful a lot of times, but we release the pain. We go through the shadow and the pain to release it and to heal it, and that is, there's nothing more exciting to me.
I always think of Bob Marley when I think of colonization, because I love when he says, I think it's in a Redemption song, he says, you can free yourselves from mental slavery, and none but yourself can free your own mind.
Tana awa When you have an opportunity to sit in the presence of an elder speaking any kind of language, their own language, whatever it may be, just sit and take it in. Because what that will do is vibrationally activate a genetic memory in you. It will really it'll do something to you. Just being in the presence will change something in you, and you will realize something, you'll remember something.
We call the ancestors. Auntie Poe Poe, Makua Kia, Poe Mai. Nana Pua. Okomi loko ke ia po ma lama. Po ulu ani kimi o ke aku, ka leo o ke aku, ka mano o ke aku. O ka pulukui o ke aku, o ka lalani o ke aku, o ka mau o ke aku, o ka oi o ke aku, e o ka hana o ke aku.
Once, the first time I met Mr. Makua and spent some time with him, with myself, Barbara Jean, and Audri Scott Williams. It was the three of us, and Mr. Makua for a couple hours. And after he left, the three of us students went back to our room, and we were talking about what he had said, and we had all heard entirely different things. I mean, it was amazing. It was almost like he was speaking to all of us simultaneously about three different things.
Having wise people around who are generous and embracing and willing to share their knowledge with us is really healing for me. They're not telling me I'm bad.
How do you become a part of spirit? How do you talk with spirit? It's just like talking to you and I. It's no different. The only difference is don't do it in front of everybody. You'll send it to the asylum. But today, like Auntie Poe Poe, it's not a problem. We just go and everybody just gets used to spiritual.
Auntie has a background that's very, very cultural and traditional. She speaks her own language fluently, was raised in a cultural way. Also has a bachelor's degree from the University of Hawaii. She's just really conversant in both Western ways and in traditional ways, but she is full on Hawaiian.
Some of us say, I'm too afraid, I'm not going to jump, I'm going to fall. And Spirit is saying, I'm telling you, I'm going to put you, yeah? You're being such a hothead, we're all over here waiting for you to jump. And you don't want to jump. The Spirit's going to push you. And you're going to encounter that you are coming because they need you badly. So if you get a push or a poke in the side and the sun don't shine, it's one of your ancestors saying you're just procrastinating the work that needs to go on.
No, it's probably a lot more like transmission or people sitting at the foot of the Buddha or some holy person and just being in their presence and being in the presence of these people who are deep holders of tradition and culture.
And I had a traditional valued mentor, but mentor is such a minimizing word for the meaning of this relationship, and it's called an acha relationship, where an older person and younger person get together and they connect. I mean, they don't say any words to each other. They just feel the connection. And as soon as that connection is there, you know that's my acha. And he taught me much of what I know about being Aleut. He took me under his wing from age 5 until age 13. Mm. And he taught me much of what I know about hunting, about relationship, about what it means to be a man, about living, and about the animals. And yet literally, in that from age 5 to age 13, he said no more than 200 words to me.
And grandfather, I give thanks for this eagle feather today, for the fierceness, for the power, for the glory and the freedom of the eagle that this land, Turtle Island, offers to all of us.
To have a program where spirit is consciously invited in the form of a circle brings in a lot more teachers. So you have the ancestors coming in, the stars, the rocks.
I think ceremonies are very important because reconnect us with one very important path of our ancestors.
The rituals give structure to life. They give a container to our lives, space to grieve, to celebrate, to ask for help.
It just, whenever I'm in circle, it feels really real. It feels like I'm there, totally present, and I'm there with other beings, with other human beings who are totally present. It feels very sacred, very special, and it feels safe. Like the ceremonies in this program are contained, are held, are guided by people who it is their ceremony, they know how to work it. And what happens in there is powerful, it's healing, it's loving.
There's something about that feeling of being held, that it's almost like rocking a baby. It just sort of makes the whole process of acknowledging pain or seeing it for the first time a lot more gentle, and it feels a lot safer.
We make offerings to elders when we meet them for a number of reasons. The first is they don't actually need it for themselves, but it helps us to remember who we're calling on for help when we need it or for advice. When we make these offerings, we're acknowledging the ancestors and the spirits that stand behind that elder. We're also honoring the spirits that stand behind us in how we relate to this elder.
The reason we do Native American ceremonies and Hawaiian ceremonies is that the students in this program, we're supported by an international council of tribal indigenous elders. And on this planet right now, there's some cultures whose spiritual traditions are more intact than others.
Sometimes it's just that we're gathering there surrounded by the images of Hawaiian spirits, the carved wooden images of Hawaiian spirits, or standing on the land itself, or that sacred lizard woman, the Kihawahine, walking in her footsteps, feeling the power of that place of feminine spirituality changes people. And without me having to do anything, even though this is an academic program, I witness changes happening in students' life just because they managed to find that place they needed to get to.
Most tribal people have a relationship to the stars. Like, what are the names of the constellations? What do they mean? What are the spiritual significance? What ceremonies go with those constellations? You know, what planting cycles? We pay attention and work with our dreams, which is many cultures work with messages and information that comes in dreams.
When you're speaking English and you've been disconnected from your cultural, spiritual heritage and power for hundreds of years, how are those ancestors going to connect with us, right? What's the way? We don't have an intact tribal community to contain it, to hold it, to support, to protect. How is it going to happen with integrity and safety? One of the main ways is through dreams.
But your dreams are your doorways to encounter what your past has been like. And then you will have future coming in too, because it wants you to go.
I had a dream recently about a a word that I had never seen before. And then that morning I read that word in a book about Chinese herbs, and it was an herb probably that I should be taking. And so I felt like, oh, that knowledge isn't lost.
It's understood in Native belief that the feminine is a part of what we would call God. And we've been listening to this spirit of the earth right along. And some of the elders haven't forgotten that ever. So those are the kinds of elders that work with us in the Indigenous Mind program to help us to find that face of the feminine spirit in whatever tradition we come out of, whatever genealogy we come out of. So it may look a little bit different to someone coming from Eastern Europe or from China than it does, say, from Africa or from the North American continent, but it'll still be referring to that same creative impulse put into motion a long time ago.
Learning about the divine feminine helps a lot with the decolonizing, that we have female elders first and foremost, and that we also acknowledge the divine feminine, and it is even acknowledged by even the male elders and teachers that we have.
It's as simple as just saying it to yourself, I take back my mom. That easy. You don't have to go through a ritual or whatever, just take it.
And I call on my French ancestors now, the Paternosters of Berville-sur-Mer, to be with me. As I make this prayer, I address you and I ask you, help me through the spirit of the swan, the ancient way of knowing and being of European peoples, to restore balance and wholeness, to return the sacredness again to the Western rational way of thinking, that all of us might be whole with our natural indigenous mind.
So Tana Awa. Tana Awa. Everything that I offer is the work of the land. There is nothing that I offer that is me. It comes from the land, it comes from our ancestors, it comes from the Creator.
The first journey that I went on in terms of being in the program was to Ghana. I carry a staff that has the energy of Harriet Tubman in it, and I took that staff to Ghana. One of the elders there said to me that in the tradition there, that the ancestors who went forward into the Atlantic slave trade and ended up over here carried the ashe in their blood. That meant they carried the power of Africa in their blood, and that in appropriate times, those who are being called, it's that ashe that's rising up in us and calling us back home.
So in October of 2002, Barbara Dean and I went to Poland, and we stayed at a few different small farms in Poland with beautiful farming families. We were in the countryside. We were like alongside cows and pigs and learning how to milk cows and make cheese and butter and walking in the fields, and I got to look at the plants that were there and recognize some and spend time in the forest and the mountains. It was wonderful. So I feel like a lot of my research really took root, literally, being in Poland.
Walking the trail, I literally felt myself walking in the presence of, or in the footprints of my ancestors. I could feel them on the trail. One night at midnight in our little camp that we set up right outside of the YMCA, a beautiful full moon night, in a field of buttercups on a lake. We came out of the woods and found this little spot, got permission from the Y to be there. At midnight, the cops come into our camp, and before it's all over with, I'm, up against the van with handcuffs on. Nobody else, me. And I was enraged at that experience, because how could I be doing something so holy, is what I was thinking, and have this experience? And what I realized in that moment when I looked in the cops' eyes was I had to have the experience, because I had to know what it was like at midnight when my ancestors ran away and were shackled and taken away. I had to live that experience. So my relationship, you see, the buttercups were a part of that. The full moon was a part of that. The water was a part of that. Everything was about that experience.
Let this turning point be good. Let it be now, so that all the life that you've put in motion may continue, and that we might help in this great birthing.
Indigenous Mind resacralizes every aspect of our lives, sleeping and waking.
I feel like I begin to understand who I am.
It can be scary, but there's always encouragement. There's people walking the same path, and that's what makes it work. You're not doing it alone.
That just makes me feel more whole. Like I know who I am. Yeah, I know who I am. Like what more could you want?
It's easy to get attracted to what may look like the glamour of the program, but forget anything you read or anything you see and go to your sacred space and ask your ancestors if this is where you are to be. Because once you embark on this journey, your whole life is going to change.
And I rejoice in the sense of health and happiness and peace that's available to all of us who would care to join you in this great way of peace, of Swiecicki, the living tree of life, the genealogy of our ancestors. I acknowledge you and I give you thanks.
Mane